Hi, everyone. My name is Samir Balu. I'm the Real Ideas Coordinator at the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. Welcome to Animating Place into Character, the second panel in our Real Ideas conference themed Here in the Future Past. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Real Asians offices and main activities are located on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat nations. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a treaty of collective responsibility for the protection and sharing of land and resources. As we continue with a digitally hosted festival that will screen Canada-wide, we encourage audiences to learn the specific histories and stories of the lands they are settled on. The lands of Treaty 11, many treaty agreements and traditional unceded territories that continue to demand justice and to support the ongoing work of Indigenous leaders and communities. While acknowledging the festival's 25-year history of growth and challenge, we renew and refresh our commitments to more abundance and complexity in Asian and Asian diasporic film and media arts. Regardless of our pathways of arrival, we all currently benefit from the Canadian government's broken treaties and imposed violence, and reckon openly with our responsibility to this land and its caretakers. We name the ways we are complicit in structures of white supremacy, and also recognize that we are still in a time of great upheaval and need. We honor the longstanding work of organizers, creatives, and communities that continue to give us hope, language, and possibility, and work toward critical and reflexive allyship within Indigenous peoples, exercising their sovereignty and working toward justice and freedom. For today's panel, we would like to thank the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund, Ontario Creates, and the Province of Ontario for their support. Just a reminder that if you're watching live from our watch portal and want to ask us a question, to send it through the chat box or the ask a question box. If you're viewing from a phone, the chat will be at the bottom of your screen. Thank you to Jamie and Carmelle, the amazing ASL interpreters in today's session. Thank you to Michelle, our amazing live captioner. Lastly, we would love to hear your feedback about our panels. Please visit realasian.com/RI survey and let us know what you liked and what you would like to see from our industry panels next year. We'll have the QR code posted up at the end with the survey. Each entry enters you in a draw to win a survey prize. We'll take a 5-minute break in the middle of the session for everyone to stretch their legs and grab some water. I will now hand over the rest of the time to the amazing Maral, who will be moderating today's panel.
Thank you, Samir. And thank you to the Real Asian Film Festival. My name is Maral Mohammadian. I'm a producer at the National Film Board of Canada's animation studio. Welcome to the audience. I'm very delighted to moderate this very interesting panel, and would like to introduce the panelists first and foremost. We're going to do it sort of informal style, round table. So I'll ask you to introduce yourselves. We'll start with Ananya and Fiona, who are a creative pair working on their first animation project. So Fiona, perhaps you could start. Tell us a little bit about your background. It's a very eclectic mixture of professional and creative experiences here. So take it away, Fiona.
Yeah, sure. So I actually trained as a lawyer, but I'm currently a writer by profession and a community engaged artist. And I came to community arts via theater. So I have Black Youth Oral History Theater project that I run called Intergenerational, where we interview elders, transcribe those interviews, and put on verbatim plays for community. And I also am an individual playwright, and so my transition to dramatic screenwriting was pretty reasonable. I did the inaugural BIPOC TV and film writers, kids writing boot camp, and came out with a script for young audiences there for teens, currently for tweens. And then I was invited by Ananya to collaborate on our current project that's in development with the CBC, funded generously by the Canada Council as well, called Mixed Up.
And I also come to this to Mixed Up as a community engaged artist from community arts, and kind of working on short films on the side while figuring out how you bring community, or how you build community through the media art. So I ran the Regent Park Film Festival for a bunch of years. And in that time, I was just like, one main lesson that I learned there was like how important it is to have joy almost centered in the stories that you tell around BIPOC communities. And so I was on my mat leave, watching lots of TV with my 6-year-old, and realizing that she was having a hard time kind of contending with not seeing herself on the screen. And so that really kind of inspired me to propose Mixed Up. And I'm really excited and I really feel like it's not just about seeing yourself on the screen, it's about seeing lots of different kind of yourselves on the screen. So Mixed Up is part of that effort.
Thank you. I look forward to diving into that project with you, because you're still in the making of it and development. So it's even kind of more interesting because you're living the experience of bringing that to life. Shabnam, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, this conversation is going to end up shaping the project.
Shabnam Rezaei, you're a creator, producer, founder of an animation studio. You're currently in Vancouver, is that right?
I'm actually in New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about your background. You didn't begin in arts.
No, I studied computer science, engineering, and German literature. I was born in Iran, grew up in Austria, and studied in the States. I was working on Wall Street in financial software services when September 11th happened. And that sort of changed my world upside down, and that I had felt like I escaped war, the Iran-Iraq war, as a child, and then was confronted with war here. And it was a very special moment in my life where I thought I needed to do something to change the narrative around just Middle Easterners at the time were being grouped together and called terrorists, and it really didn't sit right with me. So I started an online magazine called Persian Mirror to educate the world about Iranian culture. And from there, I realized I had a very small chance with adults. So I thought, with children, we actually can shape the future. So our first project was a fluke that came my way through Persian Mirror, the website that I created. There was an inspiring writer-director that was writing a short 30-minute direct-to-DVD cartoon about the Persian New Year, which is Nowruz, celebrates springtime. And I decided to help produce that. And through that, I learned about animation, and then wanted to scale the idea of teaching kids about culture through entertainment. Very similar to what my co-panelists were saying, out of need of wanting to see yourself on television. Over time, I was able to start our studio in Vancouver. My husband is from Vancouver, and so we kept our New York office, which we had started at that time to raise funding, opened up a Vancouver animation studio also to be able to raise money, and then forayed into television. And the reason for television was so we could scale the idea of Balak and Friends, our first series, into our first television series, which was called Mixed Nuts. And that was the beginning of our company about 12 years ago. At the time, it was called Being Multicultural, and we were considered very niche. And the words for how people describe us change over time. At the moment, we're diverse, and it's very hip. So you stick around long enough, people start to pay attention. But I think now we're fortunate that things have changed and things are changing, and we need generational change to happen for people of color and people of from minority communities to be not seen as the other. That's really my goal. And for our company, that has evolved from being Iranian to any sort of otherness. So we have programming for LGBTQ, we have programming for different types of family, and introducing these concepts to children is a mission of mine.
Fantastic. I see that Ananya and Fiona smiled when you talked about Mixed Nuts. I have a feeling they know the show. Thank you, Shabnam. Anne-Marie
Sure.
Fleming, you're independent filmmaker, writer, visual artist. You are currently in Vancouver?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Welcome. Tell us a bit about your history and what you do.
Oh my goodness, I'm already intimidated. It was so interesting and revealing to hear a bit about all of the other panelists' backgrounds. It certainly colors how I'm going to look at their work from now on. And for myself, I'm an immigrant. You know, I was born in Japan, which was then a United Nations dependency. I have no birth citizenship. My mother is from Hong Kong. She's mainly Chinese. My dad's Australian. I lived in a few countries. We landed up here in Canada a long time ago. I lived in many places around the world, and my background is in English literature and in theater and in sciences and in music. And I'm just throwing all these things out to you because I'm very mixed. I have mixed interests. I'm a mixed up person, and people, it's just too complicated, right? But I don't want to choose. I don't want to choose sides. I don't want to say I'm this or I'm that. And I think that maybe just listening to you guys talk, but maybe that's part of what I'm trying to acknowledge or not let go of in my work, is that to try and keep a multiplicity of identities, if that makes any kind of sense. I just wanted to say, I know that we were all asked at the beginning to put down our pronoun preferences, and I know this is off kilter, you know, it's off subject, and you know, Fiona said she didn't have a preference, and for me too, I've never had a preference. Like I usually go by AMF. I don't even go by like a name, because I just, you know, this whole pronoun thing, it's true. It's like it's interesting. It's like we are always trying to place ourselves, right? Like, where are you? Who are you? And it's interesting because that's kind of like an entry into our whole conversation about what we're going to be talking about today, is like, what is place? How is place character? And I'm really excited to be part of this. Sorry to talk too much.
Not at all. No, actually, no, thanks for that. And I wanted just kind of go into the topic of the panel, because when I first was asked to moderate it, I was like, what an interesting, thoughtful subject, animating place into character. And then, so I was like, yeah, let's do this. Is what, you know, I was thinking about all the films that conjured up. And then I became completely like paralyzed, because in animation, of course, it goes without saying that every setting, environment, everything is intentional. Nothing is by accident. And so, you know, I was like, oh my God, the subject is huge. But then the more you think about it, the more it grows into what does it really mean, the difference between when you are conjuring a place as a character in and of itself, or even something bigger like a nation. So Anne-Marie, I wanted to start with you because you've spent a lot of time thinking about this topic of, well, in your words, landscape, but what does the topic conjure up for you? Like, where does your mind go?
Yeah, well, I think that I think the word landscape was how this topic was introduced to me, and even back when I was an undergrad, I'd actually wrote a thesis on the topic of landscape in art, in creating a myth of the North and creating a Canadian identity that was apart from American. And this was actually done by composers like Ernest Macmillan and the Group of Seven visually, but by playwrights too, by playwrights all across this country, trying to foreground landscape as a character. And as a defining character for Canadianness. But like for landscape didn't just mean what maybe most people think of, like cows and trees, right? Landscape was anything that was in a frame, and it was, whether it's an urban landscape or whether it's the prairies, whether it's the North, what is it and who's in it? And how does it affect, like the whole thing was an interplay between landscape, between place and the characters. And maybe this sounds so obvious, that of course, place affects character, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes place is the defining thing, it's defining. And you can tell a story where it is foregrounded, and it's not just like, I don't know, because I'm a literature person, so like the work of Hardy, where you see the landscape mirrors what's happening in the story, what's happening emotionally, but in fact that landscape place can be the story. And that sounds a bit theoretical, but that's where I come to this. Very exciting. No one's asked me this question in 35 years. Very exciting. So
that was the last time it was on someone's mind. Okay.
Yeah, and it was only on mine.
So in your own work, in your work, the films that you've made that come to my mind that really plays a significant role as characters, Big Trees and Window Horses. I'm sure you might have others, but can you talk about those two specifically?
Right. So Big Trees is a film that is sort of human nature versus Mother Nature. And it's a riff on a real story that happened in Vancouver about someone who chopped down, poisoned a bunch of trees because they were blocking her view. And so it's all about, so in the film, the apartment is a character, her control, it represents her control, but also the outside, which is already a mediated landscape, it's already, controlled in that there's trees on a beach, but how we're looking at place as a commodity, right? The nature as a commodity, and even, how we sell a place, how we sell the city, how we sell how we sell everything, how we sell lifestyle or safety or status. And so it's sort of a riff on all those things. And of course, in my film, the trees or nature or the universe has a larger say in things than anything that we could desire to control. Window
Horses, totally other experience.
Yeah, and Window Horses takes place at a poetry festival in Iran, right? And so, which is a place that is not my culture, and I've never been to, and yet I felt obsessed with wanting to tell this story. And it like when you're talking about animation, I think everything is created, right? Everything that you want is created. So in Window Horses, I use a bunch of different techniques from almost using negative space, where there's nothing particular about this place. It's a space of the imagination that I'm presenting. In some places, there's more realistic representations of Iran, but I'm trying to show in Iran that it's not just a place that exists now, but also historically, culturally, in the imagination, and it's not a film about Iran. It's a film about poetry and the creative and powerful healing power of art, right? And connection between people. So it's about trying to get very, very specific, yet present this in a way that is has some universals in it. That sounds very big also, but hopefully when you see the clips, it'll make more sense.
Maybe we should roll the clips, which include something from Big Trees and Window Horses, but also your Stick Girl films.
Oh yeah, I'll just preface that with it starts with how I started everything, with nothing, with negative space and just adding things. And yeah, that's enough.
We're going to roll this clip. It's about 4 minutes, just over 4 minutes long.
She has my brain. She has my hair. My brain. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bonjour, Ole. You're late. Ciao, baby.
Close your eyes and think of a hotel room in Brindisi. You're sitting at a desk looking out the window onto the street below. It's siesta time and there's not a lot going on out there. You're writing an entry in your journal. If you're having trouble visualizing, it looks like this.
It's a stunning winter view. I know that you must agree. Everyone just walk straight to this window. Maybe it's the place for you to sit and stare and watch the sea. Waterfront will hold its value, we know.
I've never seen anything like it.
He's never seen anything like it. Is it an insect, perhaps a pine beetle?
Is it an insect, perhaps a pine beetle?
Well, these are beech trees, so...
He says they're beech trees on the beach.
Is it PCBs in the soil?
That's clever.
Parkour guy knows his stuff.
Not a clue.
But
He's the expert.
Here's your culprit.
He's found the culprit.
Poison.
That tree is
Poison.
They used this to get rid of a prickly pear cacti in Australia, an opportunistic plant that was brought over by the British because it was the only food of a particular beetle that, when crushed, provided the red dye for the red surge. The only way to kill this invasive species was to inject this poison into the center of it. Kill them like that.
Our next performer this morning is Rosie Ming.
Salam. My father was Persian.
He must be very proud of you.
So, your father is Persian?
My father abandoned me when I was 7.
But you are looking for his story, yes? So, you will find it everywhere.
Ask your question.
I've got my question.
Open the book and choose a poem.
How is it everybody here knows everything about everything?
The more you learn about others, the more you deepen your understanding of yourself. This is the journey we are all on.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from everyone about some of the specific projects, and then I'm going to throw some big questions out at you. So you're not off the hook yet, Anne-Marie. But we're going to move on to Shabnam. And Shabnam's the creator, producer of a couple of really interesting children's shows, preschool, I guess. 16 Hudson, for one. Could you talk about that show? It's centered on an apartment building, 16 Hudson. And what's really nice about the show is that it's sort of like not in the suburban kind of open space as a lot of kids shows are. It's a more urban apartment complex, very familiar to a lot of us. You don't see that as much. Can you talk about that setting and how it's a character? And
yeah, so 16 Hudson, as I'm talking about it, feel free to give us the first 2 images. It's a show based on 4 friends that live in a small building in a big city. And this was one of the first images we created about this place that was so important to the show, and the building itself, which is a character in the show, in that so many things happen in the building and affect the children's lives and their adventures and everything that happens. So they're essentially 4 families. Lily is Iranian Canadian. She's about 9 years old. Her best friend Sam lives next door. He's Chinese Canadian. Underneath Sam is Amala. She's half Indian, half Irish. And then next to Amala is Luke, who has been adopted by his 2 dads. And so the building itself has a lot of character. If you go to the next image, you'll see maybe a night image of our street. And the art design for 16 Hudson was loosely based around one of my favorite artists of all time. Growing up in Vienna, Austria, I was very influenced by the art of Gustav Klimt. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his famous painting called The Kiss, which has a lot of feminine and masculine in the rectangular square shapes and then the very round shapes. So if you look in this particular background, you'll notice our flowers and bushes are round, and our building structures, windows, doors are mostly square. So very much taking inspiration from that. And then the colorful palettes that we use, aiming to give the show a very distinct look so that it's setting itself apart. And kind of as a background to that quote unquote multicultural world of kids being from everywhere, really infusing the diversity of color, shape, size, preferences for our kids. So the show, centers around these 4 kids. And season 1 was very much us getting to know the kids and their adventures. And one of the first episodes, Lily loses her tooth, and it turns out a mouse that lives in the building has taken the tooth, and she wants it back because she wants to put it under her pillow so that the tooth fairy can come. And so we find out that this little mouse in the building has taken it away. And through the many seasons that we've done, the show's airing on TVO Kids in Toronto, and then Knowledge Kids on the West Coast, where we are in Vancouver, also in French on SRC Radio Canada and TFO. But season 2, we kind of took it to a different place with the concept of introducing an immigrant family that's coming to the building. In this case, we chose a Kurdish family. We called them the Newcomer Family. And in one of our first episodes, we showcased their journey to Canada, like why they, things at home were not great, so they had to leave and come to Canada. And the design of the backgrounds of showing their home and how it wasn't safe and they had to leave, and then the things they brought with them. We showed a nice balance of the family needing to come to a new place and a new country, but then also we have episodes where we show the strength of this family and what our existing 16 Hudson characters are learning from the Garmianis. There's one episode where at 16 Hudson, the electricity goes out and it's Thanksgiving and Luke really wants that turkey in the oven. Of course, they don't know how to make turkey when there's no electricity. And sure enough, the Garmianis are in the backyard with a massive old barbecue and are used to feeding larger families because they have bigger families. And so they welcome everyone down to the courtyard, and with their coal barbecue grill managed to feed everyone for that episode. So showing a balance of these neighbors and their strengths and weaknesses for that episode. I think we have a little clip of it that we might want to show.
Yeah, we can roll that now.
And in this clip, it's about the grandfather, that Mr. Garmiani that's come. And usually with older immigrants that come, they don't really learn the language, or they have a hard time learning the language. And in this case, Lily is very concerned about his well-being. So we can show that clip.
Ivan said there were kids in the family, a mom and dad, plus a granddad. But where is he?
I don't know.
Bop here?
Yeah, their granddad. Can I meet him?
Please, Baba.
He didn't want to meet me. Maman, he looks so sad.
It must be very hard for him. Harder even than for the rest of the family.
Why?
Think about it. He's older, so he had to leave a place he's lived his whole long life. Everything he knows. All his friends.
And then he came to a place where he can't even talk to anybody because he only speaks Sarani.
It's not easy.
It must be scary and awful. We should have brought him a special gift. I wish I'd thought of that.
Give him time, Lily. Everyone here is nice. It will be better once he gets to know us.
Okay.
So I don't want to give it away, but Lily ends up playing chess with the grandfather, and they create a very long friendship where, once a week she goes over, and through the game of chess, they become friends.
I gotta say, I love that you've managed to put these important nuances that in this, especially with this particular family story, because there's the reciprocity of, the refugee family coming, and in so much media, what you see is only like the victim, and sort of like they're taken in and shouldn't they be so grateful. But, the grandfather story is just so so true, and you don't see that in kids programming really at all.
Yeah, we actually met with organizations in Toronto that set up sponsor families with incoming families, and we visited a lot of families and tried to gain real experience when we were writing the scripts. Like you say, it's really important to portray refugees as people that didn't really want to leave their home country, that their places of love, their families, and had to leave because there was danger. And for kids to understand that they are people that maybe if they seem like they're not able to do something, there's a language barrier, and it's not because there's an intelligence issue. So that's why we wanted to have episodes where they were strong and they were teaching the kids at 16 Hudson and bringing something of value to the table as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that again, that reciprocity, the coal barbecue, excellent survival skills. That's very
Totally,
cool.
totally. I'd want to be in a camp with Mr. Garmiani.
Yeah, there's lots to mine there, but let's move to Fiona and Ananya. Tell us about Mixed Up. This project is very much about a particular place, though it's fictionalized, I understand, but it comes with some personal experience that you're infusing into it. So tell us about where the show is set and how.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you could pull up that image as well, that would be great. So our show is, inspired by Scarborough, and also inspired by where Fiona grew up, but also inspired by the amount of time we've spent as kids and adults in community centers. Community centers have been such important spaces of fun, but also like just getting to know people, spending time. And so our show Mixed Up, in it, a new community center is opening up, the Sunshine Community Center, and the kids are really excited about it. In this picture, you can see our main protagonists here sitting around a table in a cafe that has all their favorite foods from all over the world. They're eating doubles, actually, if you zone in on what's on that table. And the community center is this like oasis where they see friendly faces. There's lots of fun things to do. And what they discover is that something's not all sunshine at the Sunshine Community Center. And they discover that there's this ooze kind of bubbling from the bowels of the center. And they think that it's a menacing creature. And so what the season that we're working on is kind of discovering what you see, what you might think is menacing. You just need to spend some time getting to know it to understand the depths. So what I like to say, it's like, it's about friendship, it's about community, but it's also about having fun, even though you're covered in slime. So the community center is like very core. That's where all the action takes place. And it's a place where you feel safe and you can explore.
And how? Yeah, go ahead.
And I'll just say about our characters. So in the pink striped shirt is Makoya, who's Afro-Trinidadian, which is my identity. And then there's Shri, who's South Asian, Ananya's identity, and we have Bo, who's the boy kind of making the peace sign and holding up the selfie stick. He's Filipino, and the two girls are Idol and Iman, kind of faux twins who are Somali. And what we really did in developing the show in our first phase of development was really looking at the different communities that are in Scarborough and make up Scarborough, and try to bring those to life, because those representations aren't really there. And also showing kind of like the joy and imagination and strong community sense there is in Scarborough, and kind of bringing that to young audiences.
And how grounded is it in like your real experiences, and how much of it is sort of more sci-fi and imagined, it's sort of playing with fantasy, but it still seems to be pretty rooted?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the kids kind of come from different backgrounds. So, for example, Mokoya's recently moved from kind of a Markham in Toronto, so she's kind of has a different class background from some of the other kids. Bo, his parents are back home. You know, and Shri and Bo and Iraniman, they live in the neighborhood. They've been there for a long time. Bo is an immigrant. And so what they're experiencing is kind of community destabilization and change brought on by Mr. Sunshine, for whom the center is named after. And so, like, for us, we wanted to really explore the role of kind of gentrification very lightly from a child's perspective. But, you know, a lot of the elements of this community center are kind of, you know, fantastical, dreamlike. You know, there's impossible things happening. There's like a rainforest garden. There's obviously the ooze. You know, there's different creatures that come through. So really, to us, it's a place of imagination, while outside of the center and the things the kids are dealing with are very much real.
And in the way that you are kind of, you talked about joy a few times, so I want to kind of zoom out a little bit in terms of how do you create character out of a place, which is a spectrum. I think in animation, it's always, you always have to think about it, but it's definitely a spectrum. So, you know, in your case, it's you're imbuing your location, your main location, with joy and wonder and sort of mystery. I guess it's a question for everyone is what when you're thinking about sort of these site-specific projects of yours, like what are the things, what are the feelings, or what are you trying to imbue as when you're in the concept phase? Is it memory? Is it a feeling? Is it a projection of a place? Is it?
I can go if that's all right. For me, places have always had a feeling. Like, where do you feel comfortable? Where do you feel at home? And as an immigrant and as someone who's lived in many places in my life, it's sort of like the feeling of home is a big topic. We dedicated all of season 3 to the feeling of home. And given the 4 characters that I described to you, they all have different backgrounds, but 16 Hudson is their home. And in season 3, they all get to go back to their ancestral lands. So where they came from, where their parents or great grandparents or grandparents came from. So Sam, for example, goes to China, and we have a visit and we see all the sights of China and we try all the foods. And, you know, for Amala, she gets to go to India. I've brought some backgrounds that we brought of India that we can show while I'm talking. And then for Luke, his family happens to be moving out of 16 Hudson, and he's kind of comparing what this new place is like. They're going to move to a house that has like a swimming pool, and he's excited about the swimming pool, but then he's going to miss his friends. So the location of the home for Luke means friendship and his immediate world. And then in the case of Lily, who is Iranian Canadian, she can't go back to Iran, and she does a virtual tour of Iran on the iPad with her grandfather. These are some of the images of the trips of India that we did for Amala's visit, taking good care in, you know, trying to show the details that you might see in the Indian bazaar, at some of the sites that you might see in the streets of Delhi, in the homes of the families that she's visiting. But of course, yeah, they do a lot of site visits, the famous Taj Mahal. But of course, if you, at the end of the season, all the kids conclude that, you know, they all battle with this idea of where's home. For Amala, in this clip that, if we could just show it real quick, she's worried that she's not Indian enough when she gets to India. So let's show that clip real quick, Mimi, if you have it ready.
Cardamom, turmeric, garam masala. We need a bigger box. This is the most amazing trip ever. Right, Amala?
Wrong. I'm going back to 16 Hudson. Taxi!
What's the problem?
I'm worried about my dance. What if I'm not Indian enough?
Well, you're perfect just the way you are.
But I dress differently than everyone here. Those spicy samosas made my eyes water, and I'm not even 100% sure I'm using the bathroom right.
True.
I knew it!
About the samosas. Talk about Spice City with Yao sauce. You want to know a secret? The first time I came to India, I was nervous too.
Did you have to do a dance too?
In a way. I really wanted Mom's side of the family to accept me. But they did more than that. They loved me. And they'll love you too.
There is a lot to love. But to make sure, maybe I should Indian up my dance moves a little.
Okay, I guess we're rushing again.
So this particular video hasn't been mixed yet. We're still in production on it. But this idea was so universal among our writers who are immigrants all. And this one was written by Ravi, Steve Kajuria, who's Indian and, you know, Canadian. And this was the feeling he had when he went back to India. Like, am I Indian enough? Am I this enough? Whenever you go, and especially if you're half, or if you've been born someplace and live somewhere else, you feel like you're now something different. And are you good enough for the family? So, you know, that place gives you that feeling. Like when Amala was in India, she had that feeling of am I good enough? And then also it made clear for her that 16 Hudson was her home, and that's where she felt comfortable. So all the kids sort of conclude that no matter where they're from, their love and their home is at 16 Hudson. And this is how the building is a character. It's that love for that place, that location, those walls. In one of the episodes in this season, Lily's complaining about how loud the building is and how decrepit and old it is. So she decides to renovate it. She gets rid of the heater sounds, and then it's now the sterile environment, and they don't like it. So they make it dirty again, and they turn on the heater noise back, because that's what felt like home for them in this location. So the building and that sense of home, I think, is what's really great. Sorry if I took over 2 minutes here. I know we're supposed to take a break.
We are supposed to take a break. Does anyone have anything else that they
Well,
want to say?
I wanted to say I love that exploration of home contains that, like, it's fraught, you know, like it is like, where do I belong? And like home, you love it. And at the same time, so many of us have such a hard time with home. So I love that both those things were part of the story there in 16 Hudson, Shabnam. For us, like one of the things for us is that, like, in this community center, only these kids can see the green ooze, and that impacts how they experience the space. And so, you know, it's like we may all be in one space, and that space might have it look a certain way, but depending on who you are, you also experience it differently. And so that character is very multifaceted and complex. And so, yeah. That's all I wanted to say.
So let's take a break here. It'll just be 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and get into the juicier stuff that's just been raised. Thank you, everyone. So see you in 5. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. There's some good questions coming in from the audience. So soon I'm going to turn there, but I just want to pick up on something about sort of the idea of home and belonging, and it touches on something Anne-Marie had said and something Ananya had said earlier. And I'll preface it by, I was in Mumbai a number of years ago, and I asked my student guide there, how come some people call it Mumbai and how come some people call it Bombay? And her answer was, Mumbai is a place and Bombay is an idea. And this notion of the stories we tell and to create these sort of the myths of place is really interesting, and it comes with responsibility. Right. So I guess the question I would put to anyone who wants to answer that is, are you conscious in that sort of notion that you're creating a vision of something, you know, whether it's a community center or a vision of, you know, a place you haven't been to, but that you're creating culture out of that because you're creating that image, especially in animation, which is so powerful because you get to design it from nothing. You get to decide every aspect of what it looks like, how it feels, how stylized it is, what you omit, what you don't show. So how consciously are you kind of toying with that idea, if at all, when you're working on kind of such site-specific stories where the place is really a character and that's so important culturally to either yourself or others? Anne-Marie, you're on mute, but go ahead.
Hello. Well, I guess I'll speak to that, especially because of Window Horses, which takes place in Iran, as I said, a place that I have not been to. It's interesting that you use the word omission, because I mean, A, that's true, but B, I would say that I like to think of it in terms of creation, like what you put in, you know, before what do you leave out. Sometimes what you leave out is after you put it in and you realize, no, that is inappropriate, right? Or that no longer serves its purpose anymore. You know, this isn't the first time that I've gone into a culture that is not my own. And it's always very scary. In fact, sometimes going into your own culture, your own family is the scariest place because that's where you feel like you have the most responsibility in some ways and the most place to go wrong. But for, you know, I would like to have shown you other bits of Window Horses. I just showed you a bit of the trailer. That's the only thing that I had access to right now. But if you remember, for those of you that saw it, for example, there's the Azan when she first comes in, and you see her, you see the tower, you see the prayer tower, and then you see her enveloped in this music, right, in the sound of the prayer, which for me was, this is her introduction to the space, that it's like this 360. It's not just the buildings, it's not just I wanted you to be able to smell it, just like it's dawn, right? It's dawn. She sees the city. She hears the call to prayer, and she's absolutely in this space. So you know, the reason why it took a long time for it to get to Iran, but the story started when I was in Germany. I was in an artist residency in Germany, and just getting back to what was said earlier, was being so multicultural and living so many places, and my family all left Canada, like no one's here but me. And I never thought that I never really thought of myself as Canadian, or until I went away and I was an immigrant in another country. And then I went, oh my God, I am not only Canadian, but I am West Coast. I am a Vancouver person. And the things that I know and the things that I am clueless about are because I am from here. And so it was so interesting that it took me living somewhere else to realize where my really largest cultural references were from. And so I made my little character, Rosie Ming, who's half Persian, half Chinese, and all Canadian, right? As this sort of optimistic, clueless person who goes into another culture, and everybody, and that's how I got around this, because she really is me, is that everybody was so kind to her. Everybody wanted to help her understand a little more. So everybody she talks to and every place she goes, there's a little explanation to open her world to her to understand a little bit more, and told by different voices, because different people have different, they come at things from, different places.
And you did tons of consultation with Iranians.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yes.
More than you could ever have wanted, probably.
Well, I mean, having two Iranians here on the panel, I mean, I don't think I'm talking at a school that everything's political. Everything is political, right? You can't, and everything has a diversity of opinions, let's put it that way. And so, I would show my images to people, and they would be, confused. I had a lot of steering, but also it's interesting because the people who came on to help me, whether it's animators or composers or calligraphers, poets, and actors, and just people who know things. Everybody was just so generous. It was very much a paralleling of the experience that Rosie has when she actually goes to this imaginary country that I made up. But yes, like Shabnam too, I wanted to tell a positive story. Like I wanted to present a beautiful and deep culture, a way of somebody being open to that and exploring that. And I think that's what resonated with this. For a lot of different audiences, a lot of different ages. Like it was curiosity and openness that people related to.
Anyone else want to take that? Do you feel like you're part of the myth-making process?
Oh, I did want to say also, sorry, is that, I've said too that I didn't feel, because Iran has such a rich history of representing itself in culture and in film and, in poetry for thousands of years, that it is true that I might be, especially for younger audiences, one of the first introductions to this, especially in the States, to audiences who aren't familiar with Iranian film or just have certain types of images available. So there is that. This opened in the States right when there was the the Islamic ban with the last administration, and I had in one case Don McKellar, who has a voice in it, he represented the film at some place. When the lights went on at the end, somebody got up and wanted to apologize. like I had audiences in the States always wanting to apologize, and sometimes I'd have my actors there to apologize for the I don't even know the word, the disrespect and the to just an enormous group of our human beings. So that has nothing to do with this conversation, but yeah, it matters. Your images matter. What you say matter all the time. People hear them.
I'm going to start
Yes.
going to some of the audience questions, and
Oh.
this relates, I think, this tells me that we should touch on this a little bit more. Someone's asking, is animating a place like 16 Hudson or the community center and Mixed Up based on a place close to you? So maybe you could each talk about, again, how it comes from your life experience.
Yeah.
Let's start with, Ananya. Go
Can
ahead.
and I also want to say something in relation to what Anne-Marie was saying, is that I love this idea of what you're putting in, not what you're leaving out, because you're leaving out a whole lot. Like you're leaving out most things. And in animation, as we're learning, like, you know, how many characters we're able to put in is highly limited. The amount of like backgrounds we're able to have, you know, there are only a number of those that we can have. So why you're putting in the characters and the characteristics around you really has to matter. And you can't, like, one of the things that weighs heavy on me is that, you know, people express a lot of excitement in terms of having a show that centers racialized characters. And there will only be a few of them, you know, like there's so many more stories to tell, and they should be told. So there's a heaviness in terms of like, there's an impossible task, you know, to really represent a location in any kind of complete way. But in terms of the question that you asked, like how is the location that we're engaging has to do with our
close to you.
Selves, and I'd like to also invite Fiona to talk about it because Scarborough is so important there. But for me, it's about it's also about a feeling of home and like where you find it, especially if you're living, you know, especially if you're not able to find that in your home itself for various reasons. And so how do you, and what is something that's home? Is it the food? Is it the people? Is it a quiet place for yourself? So it's thinking through what home has meant for me, different stages of my life. But also working in Regent Park, where I've seen kids come to a community center that they're excited about and at the same time kind of really worried about, because the community center opening up also means their community is going to change and they don't want that. So they want a nice place, but they don't want all the things that are going to come with it.
Yeah. And I'd say for me, it is inspired, not necessarily just something that's close to me, but like for example, where I live in Scarborough, there is a community center right across the street from my building. But like I tried to get access to it before the pandemic for my theater project, and that was so difficult. Like it was so impossible to get access to a space that is in my literal, I could see it from my window. And then I've also done some work with the same intergenerational project because some of the youth come from Rexdale, so I got a connection to a Rexdale community center, and it was also like a lot of bureaucracy to animate that space after hours. Like it cost extra money to have somebody watching us to be able to access it, and it was very kind of devastating to see how bare it is. You know, like most of the kids kind of leave, you know, by 6, and we would start programming at like 6 to 8. And we'd have to be out very strictly, and you know there was like a lot of limitations. And so for me, like imagining the Mixed Up Sunshine Community Center is really like the place that I longed for, the place that I longed for in, you know, my neighborhood, which is surrounded by priority neighborhoods and like a lack of access, a lack of programming. Like Anani and I were talking about you know the show and the world and the characters, and we were saying that, like, you know, for me, I grew up in many parts of Scarborough, and one of those was Cedar Brae, and at the Cedar Brae Library, which has been you know, redone, revamped to like a really cool place. And so like we were saying, like the place that libraries had for us as kids growing up, like we're imagining a combination of like that and the community center and the food and the family feeling. You know, like some of the characters are aunties and tanties that I grew up with, you know, eating their food because my mom was at work and couldn't cook for me, couldn't make my lunch, couldn't do any of those things. Like, you know, like there's a lot of hands that go into raising kids to me in Scarborough. And so like, I really wanted to capture that and honor that. And like the rec manager in the community center, to me, he was specifically somebody who stayed in that community, who worked his way up, who's now ushering in this new center that he's very proud of to share with his community.
Shabnam, is 16 Hudson based on life growing up in Austria or multiplicity?
So actually, my home address in New York is 16 Hudson. It's a real place. And it just so happens it's a small building in the middle of New York. But the way we designed the art, we wanted it to be very universal because we were taking the project out internationally and we're trying to raise money for it at an international level. So you'll notice in the art, I remember before we had any funding to develop it, I was at MIPCOM and the broadcaster from Brazil came, they were from Rio, and they said, "Oh my God, this place looks like it's Rio. It's got a river, it's got the buildings." I'm like, yeah, it's Rio. And then a broadcaster from Toronto came and there was the CN Tower. There's a tower there that looks like the CN Tower. Like, oh my God, this is Toronto. I'm like, yes, it's Toronto. So whoever asked me where it was like, we wanted it to be that city feel. And it really doesn't matter where it is because it is that city feel. It's the feeling of fast-paced, loud, the kids gotta go, they don't have much time. That is a sense of, you know, the location setting the pace of life and setting the schedule for the kids, for the characters, and a lot of the things that happen in the city. So it's really important that it's a city setting where I feel it's a really rich experience for kids. You know, they see fire trucks and they have community gardens and all of these things exist in my real life. And I have two girls, ages 6 and 10 now. When I started the show, they were very little. But our building is a lovely building where we'll literally like leave all of our doors open, like on the weekends, and kids, there's so many kids in the building, kids can just go from one apartment to the other apartment. And they use the hallway as a playground in the wintertime because it's too cold to be outside. So elements like that are used in the show as well, where the neighbors are very friendly. We have like an older lady called Mrs. Oldstein in the show. Ivan is the super. He's the only real character that I based on real life Ivan. All the other families are families I made up and wrote into the show. But there's definitely inspiration from real life in everything that I do.
This is a question that relates to what you just said. So I'll put it out to anyone who wants to take it. Do you recreate a place based on how you feel about it, or try to reconstruct it based on how it looks visually in real life? Like, how true do you try to stick to reality?
Who wants to take that one? I feel like I've been talking.
Well, I just listening to you guys, I just think it's just funny. I'm looking at my work in a completely different way. It seems like so much of it comes from, so much of it is from feelings and imagination and poetry and stories, and I have some touchstones that make it recognizable as a place, but how verisimilitude isn't, I guess, is not my project, right? It's really interesting because all the places that I create are compilations of so many other places and so many other stories, and they are like everything that you choose has a story, like every prop that you choose or every person. You can't, like, you know, as Ananya was saying, like there's so much that you leave out, but you try to have something that stands in for all of those stories that you can't tell, you know. So yeah.
Fiona and Ananya, do you like use the Rexdale Community Center or you know, Regent Park as specific like architectural reference or photographs of specific things?
Well, you know, I follow all the community center updates all across Toronto. Like, I'm like, this new community center is opening in Scarborough. There are lots opening, like there are a couple at least, you know, and I'm following what they're doing just out of curiosity, and how a community center's design really matter to the community. And there's always this like challenge, you know, what are the resources, what's possible, kind of like the conversations we have about animation when building that world. But like Fiona said, like we're trying to build a world that we wished we could have had. And so there are lots of architectural elements in this Sunshine Community Center that cannot exist in real life for many reasons. So like we appreciate what's out there, but like, you know, we'd like some, like, you know, more warmth and more wood, more windows, more trees, more, yeah, I don't know. It's just, so we're playing with fantasy in that way and hoping it'll feed like ideas for actual buildings in the future.
Yeah, because also like an unnamed kind of theme is environment too, and engagement with nature. So we're trying to like push the bounds, as Ananya is saying, of what a community center can do and look like. So like the trees grow out through the roof and the ceiling, like you know, like there's a rainforest possible garden, and that's the community garden. So like and there's also this like ooze that's manifesting, so you know, that's also very important, but going to be placed in subtly, like kind of how you're saying, Anne-Marie, like, you know, there's going to be a lot of thought through of like the different rooms that we could show, you know, the different things in the rooms we could show, and the different like plants and wildlife.
Ananya and Fiona, there's a question for you specifically about your collaborative process. How do the two of you work? And if you'd like, you can talk about the rest of the team. Who is the team? How did you design it? But first, just what's your collaborative relationship?
I'm looking at Fiona, but I realize she doesn't know I'm looking at her.
Does what?
Zoom. Well, we meet a lot. We talk, then we go away. We do, like, sometimes we split what are the different things we're supposed to be working on, then we bring it together, we talk about it. And really every time we seem to talk about the project with people, or we're pitching it, or we're, you know, whatever, it kind of develops still. And so there's a lot of writing, refining, coming together. Like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking too broadly about it. How would you describe it, Fiona?
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. Like right now we're in that beautiful phase, pre-production, where we can imagine as big as we want, and then we'll have folks kind of reel us in. So we're working with two senior writers, and we're actually working with an animation studio. So we're not doing the animation ourselves, which is a different approach to telling animated stories. You know, sometimes there's more control. You know, people are visual artists themselves. So like we have that extra added layer and buffer, but it's to us, it's to our benefit, because this is the first time we're doing this, and so we really want to do it justice. And so like having that mentorship is really important to us to grow as creators.
So you're co-writers and co-directors, is that right?
We're co-creators and co-producers.
Okay.
And we are co-writers, but right now we're specifically working towards a pilot that will be aired that I'll be writing, with lots and lots of notes and input from Ananya, because we're also trying to build out what the show could look like as a series.
So do you get to work directly with the designers and the animators? Yeah. Okay. Question for Shabnam. Do you feel like there's a relationship between Persian Mirror and 16 Hudson? And what are the connections that you see?
Oh, so Persian Mirror was a long time ago. It was me trying in my own little world to do something, and it led to so many beautiful things, including being able to start our company and to do the work that we do now. From Mixed Nuts, which was our first series, we did a show called 1001 Nights, which are the and in North America, they call them more Arabian Nights, which is a misnomer because they started in Persia and encompass stories from all around the world. And as a child, my dad would tell me these stories, and then just like in the books, he would leave off the cliffhanger at the ending, just like Shahzad would, and tell me the rest of it the next day. So we tried to serialize it and make the stories age appropriate, and they take place all around the world, including in France, where some of the stories were written once the initial tales were codified by Arab storytellers brought to France and translated into French. So that show is available for folks to watch, and it's done really well for us. We have a curriculum program attached to it where we implement lesson plans for kids outside the school environment. So we have, for example, a lot of projects with UNICEF where we are working with refugee children all around the world and children at risk that are either war-torn or don't have school systems where they live. So that's a big part of what we're doing at the moment. But with 16 Hudson, it's kind of a better version of Mixed Nuts, which was the first series I ever produced. And I was just learning back then how to be a producer. And, you know, sometimes when you look back on your old work, it's hard to watch. And that's kind of how I feel. But I've learned a lot, and that's been really nice. Another show that we're really proud of is The Bravest Night, which is on CBC Kids, featuring a prince and a knight who get married and adopt a young girl named Nia, who wants to be a brave knight like her father. So every episode is a lesson in what it means to be a good knight or a good human, really. And that takes place all around, mostly in fairy tale land, but place also is super important there. Yeah.
I'll ask one last question. It's a bit of a transformed version of something from the audience, but when you're working on something that is home, a story that's related to something that's from your lived experience, is it challenging because of the feelings attached? And if so, how do you work beyond that? How do you overcome that challenge?
I can say that, you know, the characters that Fiona and I have been working with as part of Mixed Up, you know, there are parts of us in them. And I found it very challenging because I felt like the things that I held on to most, that I was most vulnerable about, or like I would put that in my character, and not in my, I'm saying my character, but like you know what I mean, like I would see myself in that character, and then I would just hate it because I could see myself, my 10-year-old self, working through that, and it made me really sad actually for a while, like to, you know, and then I just had to keep thinking about how, and I was like, joy is important to me. Why is this character so sad? And you can't have this character when you're trying to make kids laugh. And I had to really like think about that and think about different scenarios, not think about that character, and then come back, and like I feel so relieved to have found that she can also be like happy and funny, and you know, and I feel like it's been like a process of kind of shedding and healing for me too. So,
you know, I think that whenever I put aspects of myself into any of my characters, or I put something personal in a scene, in a place, it does. It lets you see it in a different way. And I think it gives you a lot of compassion, you know, compassion for your younger self, compassion for experiences, for what you've gone through. Like, you know, it's not like art therapy, but it's amazing. And, you know, we're all talking about animation here, that when you have a little bit of distance, it can allow you to feel things that you wouldn't be able to if it was exactly like it is, you know. Yeah. Like yeah, it's really moving.
Any last words? We're basically out of time. If there's no final comments, I just want to thank you all, and thanks to the audience for the great questions. And thanks to Samir for putting the panel together. It was his idea, so yay. And yeah, thanks to the festival.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey,
Thank you for having us.
No problem. Thank you so much for being here. And I really want to thank all of you for such a wonderful and thoughtful conversation. I really felt seen during this conversation, and I hope that viewers at home felt the exact same way. We'd also love to continue this conversation on our film forum on Discord. If you aren't on Discord yet, we would love for you to join the conversation. We dropped a link into the chat, and we'll have a QR code posted up too. Please scan the QR code for our survey as well and let us know your thoughts. Again, thank you to Maral, Anne-Marie Fleming, Shabnam, Ananya, and Fiona for today's conversation. Thank you to Jamie and Carmelle, our amazing ASL interpreters. And thank you to Michelle, our awesome live captioner. And for our backhand support, thank you, Jasmine, Mimi, and Joe. You're wonderful. And just a reminder that Real Asian is still going on until November 19th. You can learn more about our programming and how to buy a ticket at realasian.com/festival. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you take care and hope to see you join our panel tomorrow. Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.